All right. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padurjakacharya Ashtotar Tadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padurjakacharya Ashtotar Tadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktabinda Ki Jai All glory to the Assembly devotees. All glory to the Assembly devotees. All glory to the Assembly devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. Give me a second here. Thought I had this figured out. Yeah, okay. Okay. On this 26th day of June 2023 in San Diego, a reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 6, Prescribed Duties for Mankind, Chapter 16, King Citraketu Meets the Supreme Lord, text number 7. Nityasyartasya sambandho hi anityo drishyate nrishu yavad yasya hi sambandho mamatvam tavadevihi nityasyartasya sambandho yanityo drishyate nrishu yavadyasya hi sambandho mamatvam tavadevihi nityasyarthasya sambandho yanityo drishyate nrishu yavadyasya hi sambandho mamatvam tavadevihi nityasyarthasya sambandho yanityo drishyate nrishu yavadyasya hi sambandho mamatvam tavadevihi nityasyarthasya sambandho yanityo drishyate nrishu yavadyasya hi sambandho tavadevihi nityasyarthasya sambandho yanityo drishyate nrishu yavadyasya hi sambandho mamatvam tavadevihi nityasyarthasya sambandho drishyate nrishu yavadyasya hi sambandho mamatvam tavadevihi nityasyarthasya sambandho yanityo drishyate nrishu yavadyasya hi sambandho mamatvam tavadevihi nityasyarthasya sambandho yanityo drishyate nrishu vadyasya hi sambandho mamatvam tavadevihi. Anyone in the ether?
Nityasyartasya sambandho
Nityasyartasya sambandho
hi anityo drishyate nrishu
yanityo drishyate nrishu
yavadyasya hi sambandho
yavadyasya hi sambandho
mamatvam tavat evahi
mamatvam tavadevihi
Nityasyartasya sambandho
nityasyartasya sambandho
yanityo drishyate nrishu
yanityo drishyate nrishu
yavadyasya hi sambandho
yavadyasya hi sambandho
mamatvam tavadevihi
mamatvam tavadevihi. That was tapas. Yeah, I think so. Tapas, was that you?
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Nice to have you with us, Prabhu. When do you come back?
January.
Okay.
24.
You said that's.
Yeah,
You just said it in front of the deities, you know. So. All right. Nityasya of the eternal. Artasya thing. Sambandha relationship. He indeed. Anitya, temporary. Drishyate is seen. Nrishu, in human society. Yavat, as long as. Yasya, of whom. He, indeed. Sambandha, relationship. Mamatvam, ownership. Tavat, that long. Eva, indeed. He, certainly. Who's speaking? I'm sorry? That's the Jiva. Yes, he said Jiva Uvacha before, yeah. Okay, thank you. Translation. A few living entities are born in the human species, and others are born as animals. Although both are living entities, their relationships are impermanent. An animal may remain in the custody of a human being for some time, and then the same animal may be transferred to the possession of other human beings. As soon as the animal goes away, the former proprietor no longer has a sense of ownership. As long as the animal is in his possession, he certainly has an affinity for it. But as soon as the animal is sold, the affinity is lost. Purport. Aside from the fact that the soul transmigrates from one body to another, even in this life, the relationships between living entities are impermanent, as exemplified in this verse. The son of Citraketu was named Harsha Shoka, or jubilation and lamentation. The living entity is certainly eternal, but because he is covered by a temporary dress, the body, his eternity is not observed. Dehi nosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. The embodied soul continually passes, actually continuously, that's been fixed. The embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age. Thus the bodily dress is impermanent. The living entity, however, is permanent. As an animal is transferred from one owner to another, the living entity who was the son of Citraketu lived as his son for some time. Not very long. But as soon as he was transferred to another body, the affectionate relationship was broken. As stated in the example given in the previous verse, when one has a commodity in his hands, he considers it his, but as soon as it is transferred, it becomes someone else's commodity. Then one no longer has a relationship with it. He has no affection for it, nor does he lament for it. Om jnana timirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshu unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, the main theme of this Jiva's discourse is the impermanence of relationships. He's the other side, left side, go to the left side. He's enlightening Citraketu, having been invoked or brought back by Narada Muni and Gira. And he's giving us all very important instructions. And I'll illustrate by my own life. I hope this is not out of bounds. But I think all of us have this experience as you grow older, where as a child you get totally into something. First of all, if it's a normal family, you know, you're very focused on your relationship with your parents, your siblings, maybe cousins and other things, and they have a great impact on you. If your mother say all of a sudden gets sick and she's in the hospital, that can be very traumatic, not only for her, but for a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, you can imagine. And when she comes out and she's healthy, you know, oh, Mom, thank you so much, Hare Krishna. And that's my... But the point is that there's these very, very deep relationships that develop as everyone grows up. We all experience it. But then as time goes on, if you're away from that person, or they die, or whatever happens, you're not relating to them, the whole emotional tie weakens and weakens until finally it's just a memory, right? And I'll give you an example in my own life of this. I have to confess, when I was in How old was I at that time? Maybe 12 years old. I fell deeply in love with a girl about my age. And it was this whole thing, you know, she gave me a lock of her hair. Oh, God, you know. And I was obsessed. I was obsessed. I don't know if any of you else been with it. But then, you know, I don't know if I was a grade ahead of her or something. But gradually time went on, and that whole thing diminished, and she had another boyfriend, whatever, you know. And so, and then it became completely like a fossil. You know, it was something I could remember, but there was no emotional involvement in it. It was dead. And that goes I'll tell you another thing. This has to do with inanimate objects. I was obsessed. There was one summer where I was obsessed with baseball cards. Now it would be some video game or something, you know, but there was nothing like that. And I had mastered the art of flipping baseball cards. I don't know if you had that experience where you could, you know, matching baseball cards. If someone put, you know, does 5 heads and tails, and you can match them, then you win them all. If you lose, then he takes all your baseball cards. So I became very skilled at that, and I bought like 1 pack of baseball cards. But over the summer, I lost a lot of friends, but I won all their baseball cards. And I had a full set of baseball cards. And I had the last Mickey Mantle Stan Musial card, which today would be worth $50,000, you know. And I had that stored in a little cigar box, you know, and I put that away. And then gradually I grew older, and it was just a relic in my room, you know. But I still had, you know, I would open it every so often and remember that, you know. Then I went off to college. My career in University of Chicago, which is a very prestigious university. Just when Prabhupada was arriving in New York, I left New York and went to Chicago. Anyway, that's the way it was. And I dropped out after, you know, 3 or 4 months. It's a long story. I came back, and my father had cleaned out my room, and he threw out those baseball cards. It was practically, you know, I was very disappointed, to say the least, because I still had that attachment. So this is, in our own lives, we can all review, and we all had similar things, you know. And even when you get mature and there's more firm relationships, we have some family members, you know, men here, and certainly those, you know, attachment, those relations are very, very powerful. But, you know, I also experienced that with my mother. I was very close to my mother. And when I joined the movement, I would visit her periodically. And she would always, you know, she would always try to feed me, because that's like a major thing for me. What could I eat? I said, make me some mashed potatoes or something, you know. And I would go up and so, but as time grew on, of course, the relationship was attenuated, let's put it that way. And this is the nature, this is what he's talking about here, this jiva. He himself is a perfect example of that. He says, who's really my father? Remember the first verse? I've had so many parents. I've been in so many species. I've had the relationship of child or offspring. But that's all gone now, you know, and it doesn't have any weight. I'm just informing you that, and then he said, so whose son am I really? You know? In other words, it's just one thing after another. But when you're in the relationship, it becomes everything to you. So that's the nature of the material world. And this very interesting Sanskrit here. This sambandha and mamatvam. Sambandha's relation, mamatvam is the ownership. When you have a relationship with something that you value, or in the case of a personal relationship who values you, which can really cement the relationship, then it becomes very significant in your life. You know, this is who I am, right? I'm the son of this person, I'm the husband, wife, whatever it may be. Or this is my money, my gold, right? That's also there. But as time goes on, and this is the Krishna's time, right? That's his power. Then he breaks those relationships eventually, sooner or later. I remember reading the second canto, and I forget which verse it is, but right at the beginning, as I've referred to recently, Shukadeva Goswami has these very important verses for understanding Krishna consciousness. He's enlightening Maharaj Parikshit. And the question was, what should I think of as death approaches? What's the most important thing to hear about, chant about, and think about? You know, it's a very nice question. It's very initiative. But then people who aren't aware of Atma Tattva, the spiritual science, they have millions of things, billions of things to talk about other than that. And all of those sound vibrations just bury them deeper in material consciousness. There's a very illuminating verse I'd like to share with you that I often chant. And it's, I think, in the description of the Kingdom of God, 3rd canto, I think Brahma is speaking. And he's describing who gets to go and who doesn't get to go to Vaikuntha. Yeah. And this one is who doesn't get to go. And it's all about what we hear and speak. Yanna bhajan agabedo vachananavadat chimvandiye anya vishaya kukatamatigni yastu shuta hatabagayar nibarata saras tang tang tapanta sadhaneshu tamaksu hanta. The last word is alas. Brahma is lamenting. So here's yanna vrajanti. Here's who doesn't go, vrajanti. Agabeda is a name for Krishna, means he who destroys all sin, you know. Rachananuvada means a construction of words, whether it's oral or a book or whatever it is. Rachananuvada, which are describing the name, form, qualities, pastimes of Krishna. Rachananuvada, hear and speak. Rachananuvada, chinvanti ye anya vishaya. They hear other topics than those. Anything else but Krishna Katha. It can be different modes of nature, but it's not about God, not about the spirit. Anya Vishaya, which is called Kukata, not Krishna Katha, it's bad Katha, which Matigni, which destroys your intelligence. Yastu Shuta, those who hear, Hata Bagayar, they lose all good fortune. Atasaras, a very important word. Atasaras means it destroys your interest in the essence of life. Okay? Atasaras, tang, and those topics, tang, chapantishadaneshur, they cast you down into a hellish condition, tamaksu of darkness, alas. Everything depends on what we hear and chant, what we read, what we speak, what we write, what we hear and chant. That's the substance of it. So, how does that relate to what we're reading here? Well, these instructions themselves are part of what uplifts us. In other words, the Jiva here is explaining, he's channeling, if you will, eternal verities, that your relationship that you have with the things of this world either positive or negative. You remember that Krishna always talks about attachment or aversion. They're the opposite side of the coin, but they both bind you. So it all develops because of your relationship with these things. Now, the same holds true when you get to the human form of life, the higher intelligence. The words, the sound that you hear formulates your consciousness. So you become interested in this, and you go this way, or whatever. You hear a description. Nowadays, of course, it's not only just the words, but the images as well, right? The sounds. In other words, artificial. But it starts with the sound, and it expands into the other senses. And these things, if it's not involved with Krishna or the eternal philosophy enlightening you, then it is binding you to this world by these false attachments, me and mine. Oh, this is my girlfriend, this is my boyfriend. And then the huge trauma comes when the person finds someone else, or somehow or other they're separated, they could die. It just creates, it creates a tremendous impression in the mind of disappointment and depression. And therefore, we should be interested in finding those objects, those entities that can really give us fulfillment in terms of our relationship, and that are permanent, are eternal. We're going from the asat to the sat, from the temporary, from the destructible to the eternal. I'm working on the Bhagavad Gita, we're reviewing the Bhagavad Gita, and we came to this verse, Nasato vidate bhavo, na bhavo vidate sataha. Ubiyoba dishtontas tvanayos tattvadarshabihi. So this, not asato vidyate bhavo. For the asat, there's no actual existence. This is right there in Prabhupada's translation. We know that it's not unreal. You know, this is the Mayavadi thing. This is all, right, an illusion. No, it's real, but it's impermanent. But in this particular verse, the asat, temporary, is said to be non-existent. It might as well be non-existent. But unfortunately, it exists long enough to mimic that which is existent and to attract our mind and to keep us attached to the ever-changing world. You see? To keep us attached to all of this. Or to keep us horrified by it. In other words, that's the other side. And in that consciousness, in that disturbed consciousness, we can't even receive the message, right? We have to have a little piece of mind, receptivity. That's why I always noted over the years, and I think in my own case also, when I became a vegetarian, suddenly everything opened up. You know, somehow I was more open to yoga and this kind of philosophy. I was always into philosophy, but not necessarily Eastern philosophy, Western philosophy, which is a pale reflection. You know, they really can't figure it out, what's going on. So anyway, but when I became a vegetarian, then that's when the spiritual things became more interesting to me. And I became more receptive to the message of Krishna consciousness. And I think that's true for a lot of devotees. Now, of course, it's not necessary. You can become from any state. But you really have to adopt that first regular principle in order to stay interested, you know. And that's right in the Shastra. Nivritta tarshaya ubhagiyamanan babaushtadat shota mano biramat ka uttama shloka gunanavarat puman varajedivina pashugnat. Pashugnat means the killer of the animal, and it can also mean the killer of the soul, you know. So this is a verse right at the beginning of the 10th canto, like four verses in or something. When Maharaj Pariksit is speaking, and he's finally inviting Shukadev Goswami to speak about Krishna Leela, and he's describing the effect in Nivritta Tarshaya, especially when it's spoken by those who are free of material desire. That's what that means, pure devotees. Upagiyamana, singing, reciting. Prabhupada, you know, is constantly talking and speaking and writing and typing. And Upagiyamana, Bhavaushadach, that which serves as a medicine to cure the disease of birth and death, Bhavaushadach, and which is not a bitter medicine, but Shrota Mano Abhiramad, which delights the mind and the ear. So then what is it? Uttama Shloka Kunanavarat. Those words which describe the qualities, name, form, pastimes of Uttama Shloka, he who is glorified in the best of shlokas, in other words, Krishna. But the question is, who would give up this kata, would give up listening, hearing, and chanting it? Uttama Shloka Vina, except Virajeta Vina Pashugnat, except those who are gross meat eaters or killers of the soul, those who are determined to stay buried in the modes of nature. That was Prahlad's statement. You know, don't worry, Father, you won't become Krishna conscious. Why? Matirna Krishna padatak svatova mito vipadyati grihavatanam adanta gobhir vishatamta misram punak punaschar vidachar vinada. Prabhupada quoted this verse all the time, especially the last line. So he says, why? Because if your mind, you can't place your mind on Krishna. Matirna Krishna padatak svatova. Grihapatanam, you're taking a vow, more or less, to stay in materialistic household life, which is characterized by uncontrolled senses. Vishatamtam is entering further and further into darkness of ignorance. Why? Because again and again you're chewing what has already been chewed, thinking, oh, this variety of it would be nice, this variety would be nice. Now this, but it's the same old thing, you know. So, what's interesting is Citraketu is undergoing a 180-degree transformation of his consciousness. You know, he was a Vaishnav. I mean, it's described at the beginning how the kingdom was flourishing because he was a pious king and doing all the things. But he was totally fixated on this one thing of having a son, an heir, a king, my kingdom, so to take over the king. So it's almost the reverse of Dhruva, you know. Dhruva wanted to inherit the kingdom. He was fixed, you know. And Narada said, "You're too young. Thank you very much, but I'm going anyway." You know.
So he taught him a means by which he could be transcended. And here's just the opposite. Citraketu is going to lose all its attraction for the kingdom, for the 10 million, 100 million wives, whatever he's got, and getting this wonderful instruction from his son, his almost his 10-day son. But the jiva there is giving him very good advice, and so he's going to take this mantra from Narada Muni, and the same Narada Muni who instructed Dhruva. Notice how he always comes in at just the right time. And within 7 days, which is really not that long, he gets to see Sankarshan. And then he offers these prayers, which are really wonderful. They're going to come up in a couple of chapters. But if someone can figure out, you're pretty good, Mukunda, with the meters. These prayers are, I can't figure them out. But he has one statement in there that I always remember. Because we always hear about how if you chant the holy name you can't chant one time. I'm sorry. Chanting means to repeat. If you utter the holy name once, inoffensively, then you become free of all your karma, right? All your sin-free action is gone, And even if it's not so offensively, you make tremendous progress, eliminate. So this one doesn't say that. This says if you hear it once, if you hear the holy name once, then you eradicate all your sins, which is a very great inducement for Harinam Sankirtan, you can imagine. So our relationships are impermanent. It's back to my old favorite verse. It always comes back to this. You recognize that's the second half of the verse. That the sense pleasures that are certainly available by the contact of the senses with the sense objects are sources of misery. They have a beginning and end, O Arjuna, and therefore the wise do not take pleasure in them. Well, but we're pleasure-seeking beings. Where are we going to take pleasure? The holy name, the Bhakti Yoga. This is the great genius of the gift of Lord Chaitanya, is that we're so unqualified that if you have a program that says, yes, you take 3 months here, 3 months here, and you gradually develop, and then you begin, it's not going to work. We're too restless. Sumanda Mataya Mandabai Upadrita, always disturbed. You have to have something that can instantly give you a taste, and that's the chanting. If someone hears the chanting, takes part in the chanting, gets a little serious, tries chanting, you're going to experience something. The mind is, of course, crazy, and there's so many bad habits. But at least it may induce you to open the book, visit the temple, key into one of the thousands of sites with Hare Krishna. So that taste, ruchi comes at the beginning. It's not, of course, very intense. It's covered by your modes, your consciousness. But there's ruchi there. There's a taste. And if you're intelligent enough, you'll pursue that because the promise is there, right? The reservoir of pleasure. Prabhupada, that main lecture in that pamphlet is Prabhupada speaking on Shunvatam Sukata Krishna verse. I don't know if you know that. In early on, 70 or 69 or something. And it starts out with the glorification of the name of Krishna. It's so wonderful, it's so sweet, something like that. You look at that. And so that from that little attraction and association, everything develops. And you find there's a different way of living, of thinking about yourself, and of enjoying. Because as soon as you give a little pleasure to Krishna, which he takes pleasure as soon as anyone starts chanting his name, what to speak of, like Jayananda was so expert. You know how Jayapataka Maharaj became a devotee? He was there in the summer of love. I think the first Ratha Yatra was happened in 67, Prabhupada was up in Stinson Beach, and Jayananda was there working on the carts, and I think at the Haight-Ashbury Temple. And Jayapataka Maharaj had come down from Canada, because all kinds of people, anyone who could come down, it was all happening in San Francisco. He walks by and Jayananda says, "Hey, Prabhu, hey man, can you help come out a little bit? You know how to use a screwdriver?" Or whatever, something like that. Huh? Hammer? Okay, hammer. So yeah, that was peace and love. Yeah, okay, I can help out, helps out. An hour later, after he's helping with all kinds of things, Jayananda is preaching to him, he gets interested, takes some prasadam, gets a book. Jayapataka Maharaj. So that's the way in which Krishna consciousness is spread, that you pick up, and that's all the books are going out. Because they sense from the person who's trying to give them the book, they're not out just to make money. They're not here to try to exploit. Selling some spiritual book, they're not going to make that bigger profit. But look at this person. This person looks very, very peaceful and happy. And I've been having some trouble in my life, or whatever. This is so many things. Enough to become interested and say, okay, And that book is like a bomb. It's a mine. The mine where you don't see it, but then it's there and it blows up. So as soon as they or someone else reads that book, then Prabhupada is speaking to them, and their whole life will be changed. So it all depends on relationships, and that's why Sangha is the essence of it. I was thinking about that key verse in the third canto recently. Satam prasangan mama virya sambido bhavanti ritkarna rasayana katha tadjoshanad asu apavarga vartmani shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishiti. Such a key verse. So once one is fortunate enough to come into the association of real devotees, satams, who are like to hear and chant about Krishna, then mama virya sambido. One is going to hear about my powerful activities, name, form, qualities, right? That's what this is. Bhavanti ritkarna rasayana katha, which produces great pleasure. It's like a rasayana, a life-giving elixir for the mind, the heart, and the soul. Rasayana katha. Bhavanti ritkarna means the ear and the heart. Kayana katha. And by following this process, tadjoshanat, which is then expressed in the next verse as the easiest process of yoga, Rijubir. What could be easier? Tadjoshanat ashu, quickly, apavarga vartmani. Does everyone know that little explanation Prabhupada would give about this word pavarga and apavarga? You've seen it before. Maybe not everyone knows. There's a varga is a group, and this is different groups of letters in the Sanskrit alphabet. So the pavarga is a pa. You get the difference? The pa and pha. Pa, ba, and ma. And each one of them stands for one of the unpleasant things about being in the material world and bound up. So pa is, who remembers? Parishrama. Working so hard all around, everywhere you go, in order to, the hard struggle for existence. So much so, painila. The foam comes to your mouth. Prabhupada points out the horses sometimes see that after a race or something, You work so hard day and night. Nowadays, just to make ends meet, guys have to work 3 jobs, and their wives have to work and put the kids in very expensive daycare. It's impossible. So it's like foam is coming to your mouth. You're working like crazy. So then it's got the B. The B can mean different things. Bandha, or Prabhupada something, Bhyartata, means frustration. You feel things getting away from you, it's frustrating life. Bhyartata, and of course Bhaya, fear. Fear of impending death, or just that you're going to run out of money, you can't pay the rent, my child is sick. It's a million different things to be afraid of. And of course it all ends up in M, which stands for Mrityu, death. So that's pavarga, and apavarga means liberation. Right? Apavarga means liberation. Negation. So this is the apavarga vartmani. This is the path of liberation. And when you traverse it, very quickly you develop these 3 things. Shraddha, rati, and bhakti. Very important. Your faith increases. When you're with devotees who are sincere and you're experiencing their taste for the holy name and everything else, then faith in the process. Well, they're not so much different from me, right? I can do that. And so Shraddha, Rati, actual attraction for Krishna, and Bhakti here means prema Bhakti. Anukramishati, step by step. So that's a very encouraging verse, and it's a key verse for us. So that's the alternative to simply being absorbed in all of these temporary binding relationships. Life in general is one of relationships, no matter what species you're in, I mean, for most of the relationships, where can I get some food? From the lower animals. They spend all their time with that. Oh, it's time. Sex, yes. So it's a relationship. Of course, it's temporary. But it's true for human beings as well. We may spin a big philosophy about it, democracy, the city on a hill, whatever. It's It's just phantasmagoria. But those words which describe the reality, the actual thing as it is, right? That's how it should be our focus. Beginning of the Vedanta Sutra. If you don't even get through more than 2 sutras, you get a big lesson. It says, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now, who begins a book with the word therefore? Strange. Therefore usually is the end of an argument, right? So it means that now, therefore, having come to the human form of life, you should inquire into what? The absolute truth. Brahman. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. You have to be curious and then inquire. And then, in case your attention span is not very long, we're going to tell you what it is in the second verse. Janmadhyasya yataha. That from which everything is generated, born, and then adi. Janmadhyasya. Adi, and sustained and destroyed. In other words, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, you don't learn that in such detail in the Vedanta Sutra, but you do in the Vedanta Sutra commentary, called Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the best commentary. And Lord Chaitanya, that's why he didn't write one himself. So it's explained in millions of different ways how Lord Krishna, the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam, which then expanded into 18,000 verses, 4 verses, and he begins with before there was anything, there was me, any manifestation, when everything is withdrawn. And after everything is manifested, it's still all me, because it's my energy. So that's the person, that's what we need to inquire into. And that's what this movement is all about. That's what Prabhupada's books are all about. And the wonderful thing is we all have an eternal, intimate relationship with that Supreme Person. A relationship of love, loving service, which is the most intimate form of existence. And that's what this movement is about. And the only way that doesn't end. Anything that we can reestablish with Krishna, or his abode, his name, his form, his qualities, his associates, the whole world, which can manifest in this world by the efforts of pure devotees. Prabhupada was fond of talking about how these temples are not really in the material world, the spiritual world. It's Vaikuntha. It's meant to be Vaikuntha. So that's all we're getting here, and it's going to culminate in this wonderful, just like we had Vitrasura's whole incredible battle, culminated in him going back to Godhead. Similarly, Citraketu will achieve, that's the same person actually, but he will achieve the darshan of Sankarshan and be completely happy, without the 10 million wives and all the hankering for the son and the whole thing, It's giving up. All right, any questions, comments on these points? Let's go for the eternal and give up on the temporary. Hare Krishna. I'll leave you with one little poem. Okay. So this is something I thought of, was it last night? Oh, no, I think it was Bhadra Narayan Maharaj's slideshow. You've heard it before, but it's worth repeating. There's a prayer by Rupa Goswami. He says, Manasija panijushte, labnapatos midushte, timanagahana rupe, handa sangsara kupe, Ajita nikala raksha he tamundara daksha mubanayam mahaste bhakti rajum namaste. So who can guess what the bhakti raju is? You know what a raju is? It's a rope. The rope of bhakti. Fallen in this deep and dark and dirty well of maya, threatened by the snake of lust, whose venom burns like fire, helplessly I pray, O Lord, whose strength is near in doubt, Ajita. Place the rope of bhakti in my hands and pull me out. And of course, the only condition is we got to hold on to that rope tight. And that holding on to the rope is a careful practice of sadhana bhakti. And, being very enthusiastic, patient, determined, etc., like that. Okay, thank you. Vijay Krishna? Go ahead, Prabhu. We're ready for you.
Yes, Dravida Prabhu. Thank you very much. You're most kind. Dandavat pranams. Prabhu, can you read the 2 first sentences of the translation again, please?
Sure. They look like they're pretty long. A few entities are born in the human species, and others are born as animals. Although both are living entities, their relationships are impermanent.
Yes, that is the quote. Thank you very much. You're most kind. Prabhu, this quote inspires me to say the following in order for me to present my question. Yes, and it is impermanent because as soon as the animal is transferred, the affection and the connection between the proprietor of the animal and the animal becomes lost. But based on this, what came to my mind is that Krishna himself, he did abandon Vrindavan and to go to Mathura. And after going to Mathura, he left Mathura to go to Dwaraka. How do you... so based on this, my question is, how do you explain that when Krishna creates separation between himself and his devotees, the relationship goes on being permanent?
Because how can someone who is omnipresent, right? There's these qualities of God. They're in the Western and Eastern religion. Omnipotent, of course, probably omnipotent, omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. So that's a basic description of God, and Krishna certainly has those qualities. So, unlike conditioned souls like ourselves, where if we leave, then the relationship can break, as I was describing, attenuate, and finally be forgotten. Krishna never leaves any place, because he's always omnipresent. He's still there. He's there today in Vrindavan. And you can feel his presence by your devotion, by the hearing and chanting. This is the whole idea. The name of Krishna is Krishna. The verses describing Krishna are Krishna. The songs, he's present whenever his devotees are sincerely serving him through the words, body, mind, everything like that. And depending on our purity and our intensity of love, we'll feel his presence. And that's why you find Lord Chaitanya's ideal was really this love and separation. Because there is a sense of separation which intensifies the emotion, and then Krishna appears. He appears in your heart. You read the Antya Leela, sometimes he appears outside. Lord Chaitanya is dancing in the gardens and he sees Krishna. Oh, and then he's gone, and then just... That's what it's all about. So, on the material plane, the separation causes pain. There's no doubt about it. And on the spiritual plane, it causes the highest ecstasy, which still looks like pain. The whole thing is that Krishna responds to the intensity of your thought about him, informed by intense emotion of one kind or another, whether it's conjugal or friendship or whatever. His friends, there's whole ashtakas, I'll tell you, in Rupa Goswami. There's a beautiful Ashtaka, 8 verses, about Krishna coming back from the forest, right? Every day he's coming back. But the gopis, Mother Yashoda, the separation, even one moment. So the whole day, and then the evening's coming, and they go up to the top of the house. There's a little fenced up area where they can see the father. Look, that looks like the dust. Is that a flute? I hear it's going on. And so that increases the ecstasy. And then they finally, he appears, and the gopis run out of their houses. They drink, with their bee-like eyes, they drink the honey of the beauty of his face. There's a verse like that. And so that's a daily thing. So when you're talking about Krishna, then that separation, this whole idea, attenuating relationship, doesn't pertain. Because it intensifies the relationship, and then Krishna will eventually come based on the pulling of the heartstrings by your love. So even today, if one is pure, you can go to Vrindavan, chant the holy name, go to the temple, see the deity, hear it, and feel the presence of Krishna. But if it's some material relationship, that's just going to increase your pain, right? If you have, I've got this old catalog, when of pictures, you see that. And the tears are there, but it's all pain. He's not enjoying it. He's with someone else. He's forgotten you. But Krishna never forgets. 10 million, trillion, billion servants all over the world, both spiritual and material, and he has an intimate relationship with everyone. This is God. Because related to God, therefore, this separation and love and meeting again is the most relishable. There's a categorical difference there. That's it? Okay.
If I may, Dravida Prabhu, the answer you just gave to my question was not different from, oh my God, I will use the word spectacular again, if I may. So complete and so pleasing to the heart. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Babu. All glories to Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. You established again the difference between who is God and who is not God.
Yes.
Okay, we don't have time for any more.
Okay, short one. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thank you. My question it concerns Gyan, because we...
Did you say Gyan, like knowledge?
Gyan, like knowledge, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
And
yeah. I'm sorry.
so karma Gyan on an average time, where supposedly Bhakti, when one attains Bhakti, then knowledge is included as, and detachment as concomitant factors.
Yeah.
And so it appears that Bhakti is not dependent on knowledge, and yet we talk about Sambandha Gyan as a type of knowledge that is necessary. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says there's nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. So it gets a little confusing. Is Gyan necessary? Is it not necessary? How much is necessary? At what point? And et cetera. What's the difference between transcendental Gyan, Divya Gyan, and regular Gyan?
Yeah, well, that last one is pretty easy. I mean, but Gyan that's not Divya Gyan is not really Gyan. It's just a further entanglement in the material world, and there's plenty of that. But the idea is that, for instance, here we are, there's that verse, Nashta Prayasha Badrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya, Bhakti Bhagavati Naistiki. So he's saying that by hearing about Krishna, one will destroy the abhadras, the unwanted things in the heart, anartas, right? Glad Krishna will clean them out himself. So what's the means? By serving the spiritual master, the most important service of which is hearing from him, and by serving the Bhagavatam itself, by studying and hearing. So that's knowledge. So they're not separate. In other words, the development of knowledge is part of the process of bhakti. You're showing your devotion by your eagerness to hear about Krishna and to cultivate the knowledge. So it's not that the bhakti is dependent on it, but that it is strengthened if one follows the processes of bhakti, which are essential, part of which are cultivating this knowledge. I mean, what did Prabhupada do? He spent so much, of his life and energy in giving us these books. They're books of knowledge. But at the same time, when you read the book and you discuss it, that's bhakti. You're feeling pleasure. You're feeling transcendental pleasure. It's not just some dry philosophy you're learning. So the gyan, jnana and vairagya. Vairagya is such an important aspect. And that develops in two ways: by understanding the temporariness and the bankruptcy, if you will, of investing your energy in trying to develop your material side and material pleasures, but at the same time, by getting the higher taste. And the vairagya comes by getting raga for Krishna, rati, right? Shraddha rati bhakti ranukamishati. You're developing the vairagya. That's also in that series of verses. The next verse talks about vairagya. So what I'm saying is that the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, as well also to give you ability to help others to become Krishna conscious. That's very important, that you learn the Shastra, that you speak coherently and you're able to present. So all of that is part of your service to Krishna, to Guru, and to Vaishnavas and to people in general, that is not separate from bhakti. The development of the knowledge is part of what it means to be a devotee. Is that okay, Maitreya?
All right, thank you very much. So when Krishna says that he gives knowledge from within the heart,
Yeah.
So we start the process, show that we're sincere, and then Krishna will help.
For sure. For sure. He's enlightening us from within. We have a great advantage. We don't have to go into the university. We just stay here and chant Hare Krishna. All glories to Prabhupada. Haribol.